I'm Ras, Mark. So I'm Nev. I'm from the St Gerrans and Porthscatho Old Cornwall Society, and my colleague is...
I'm Kate Neale. I'm here representing the Cornish National Music Archive project.
And for me, the story started when my friends at the Cornish National Music Archive did a project about 3 years ago called The Music of the Clay Country, which was just fantastic, and it blew me away. And I thought, well, why are they doing it about the Clay Country when the Roseland is the centre of the known universe for me? And they ought to come down and do a project with us. So we're going to tell you about two projects that we've done, Music of the Roseland and also the Roseland Carol project in the next half an hour. So strap yourselves in as we go through this fairly quickly. And Kate's going to kick us off with the first one.
All right, so Music of the Roseland kind of started as a concept towards the end of 2022 and was planned during 2023. And the idea was to kind of take what we'd done with the Clay Country and look at music that had been known in the Roseland area from all sorts of different genres and styles, and see what we could do to engage local communities with it through a series of events and projects. So in the next slide, we had three main partners. We had the Roseland Music Society, sorry, not the Roseland Museum Society, the Cornish National Music Archive, which itself is a collaboration between Lowender and the Institute of Cornish Studies, and then St Gerrans and Porthscatho Old Cornwall Society. And being as we're up for collaboration, I must say at this point that there's an absolutely massive amount of people without whom these projects wouldn't have progressed. And a special mention comes on the next slide to Emma Campbell, who wrote something for us, which I'm going to read out quickly. So she said, "Sometime towards the end of 2022, a message appeared in my inbox from someone called Meek. He explained that the Cornish National Music Archive had recently put together a wonderful project called Music from the Clay Country and were interested in a new project focusing on music of the Roseland. He didn't think there was much of a musical heritage here to speak of. Whether this was a cunning ploy to get me to bite or an innocent, though to me outrageous mistake, I do not know, but it worked. I'm sorry I can't be with you today to be part of this presentation, but I'm confident my excellent collaborators will be able to give you a taste of the scope of our ambition and the great delight we've had in presenting our findings and witnessing the joyful responses of our community and our visitors to the Music of the Roseland project." So there's Emma from the Roseland Music Society and St Anthony's Noise.
So most of us wear multiple hats, and I also wear the hat as the manager of our Heritage Centre at Gerrans. And this acted as a sort of anchor for both projects, really, provided some funding, provided the research resources, and provided a space for an exhibition as well. The phase one of our project really was to do research, to go through the local history books, journals, archives, manuscripts, interviews, and to hold music memory days with members of the population. And that was a particularly rich source of information as we really got the community, started to get the communities involved in the projects. And what we actually found was, of course, that there's a long musical history, and there's a gentleman there on the head of the slipway at Porthscatho, just to prove that we've got some history in our part of the world. We also, when we started to look back at some of the books, we found things like this, which is a family in the 19th century emigrated from Porthscatho to Wisconsin in America. And they wrote back to us in Porthscatho, and one of the things they included was a poem. And in the course of that poem was this verse, which they said was sung by boatmen in Porthscatho. And it looked to us like it was the chorus of a shanty or something like that. So this was how we started to recover some of the music of the Roseland.
And kind of at the other end of the sort of musical spectrum in some senses, we also had a lot of influence from the classical side of music. So this is largely through Emma's connection. We came across a composer called Ian Stevens, who'd written a piece called Carricknath, a clarinet concerto. And what you can see on the screen here is a photograph of St Anthony Headland with the notes following the contour of the headland as it goes down into the sea, and he wrote a piece of music using this sort of musical figure that was directly inspired by the landscape. Emma's connection also brought us into contact with all this classical music because of her connection with the Radford sisters. Evelyn and Maisie Radford were Emma's mother's cousins, and they settled in St Anthony in 1912. And in the 1920s, they formed the Roseland Concert Party, which took music and dances from many lands all around Cornwall. They set up and trained many choirs, including St Maur's Choral Society, which was recorded by the BBC in 1937, and then later they set up the Falmouth Opera Group and were stalwarts of the Cornwall Music Festival. So this has led to a thriving musical life and society on the Roseland, and the Radford Trust was set up to support young musicians in Cornwall, and it has an impressive archive at Crescent Kerno. So there's one of the things in this classical side was an opera called Morvoran, which is Cornish for mermaid, and composed by Philip Cannon, and Maisie Radford herself wrote the libretto and was premiered at the Royal College of Music in 1964. And we'll come a bit back to that in a minute. Another aspect was the hymn tunes that were named after Roseland chapels. So we found that there was a Truro-based composer called Bob Martin, lay preacher, who had composed several hymns which had the names of chapels on the Roseland, and they were Porthscatho, Portlow, Ruin High Lanes, and Tregony. So that was another musical source for us.
So these were our principal funders. The partners, actually, the Roseland Music Society, the Old Cornwall Society, etc., all chipped in. I've got a bit of funding from Feast. And also the community chest for your local council is always worth raiding, and Julian chipped in for hours or two. So the next phase was really activity, which started to go into looking at composition, exhibition, workshops, and of course performance. So one of the first things we did is, you'll remember that we recovered that verse or chorus from a shanty. So we gave it to our local shanty group, or Duag Hour. And they then built a whole shanty song, including the music and other verses, around that chorus, so that we now have a completely new and recovered Porthscatho shanty. A really good piece of innovation, I think.
Yeah, it's a really kind of fun way of making this archive material present in present-day communities and giving it a new lease of life. Coming back to Emma, Emma undertook a series of workshops in all four Roseland primary schools in the January of last year, where she got the children playing instruments and involving a piece called the Bahortha Dances, which was written by Anthony Smith Masters, and that is named after a village in the Roseland as well. And then with the Roseland Academy, Ian Stevens, the composer of Carricknaff that we mentioned, did a workshop with year 7, 8 and 9 in the Roseland Academy, where he took an aspect of Morvoran, some part of the libretto, and had the children doing some composition around the inspiration. So that was, the Mermaid song from Morvoran was what they were using and exploring and inspiring them as what you could do with music and be a composer. And then on the 9th of February, we had a kind of a grand launch of, or the premiere, the Roseland premiere of Carricknaff, Ian Stevens' piece, and this kind of again drew in masses of musicians that had been linked with the Roseland through kind of the legacy of the Radfords that had come down and played at the Tregony Festival in the 1980s. And it was a wonderful celebration of this aspect of music on the Roseland. And then the very next day we had a memory day.
Yes, so Emma again ran a memory day in the village hall, where the children came in and played the Bahortha dances, but also the St Anthony Noise played Cornish tunes. We recovered another piece of music, a piece of jazz music this time, called Waltz on the Roseland by Jack of Jazz. But also we started to look at dancing. We included dancing in that, so that there was the Roseland furry dancing. One of the things that we discovered in the project was that on Roseland we'd belonged to dance the furry a bit different to the rest of it. Normally you sort of line up 2 by 2 in front of each other and then sort of skip forward and then go round in a circle and on you go again. But in Roseland at Porthscatho and up at Navagizzy, people line up in a line of 4 and dance it. And we didn't quite realise we were doing it different until this project, which was a nice thing to find out.
Yeah, Merv and Alison were delighted to, Merv and Alison Davey are dance experts, and delighted to have the community come in and show them how this particular version of the Furry is danced, and that was an exciting thing to add to it, and also goes into an event that will happen later on. There was a second memory day that was hosted at the Gerrans Heritage Centre, and as Nev will proudly say, was centred largely around tea, coffee and cake, which is a good invitation to get people talking and sharing their memories.
Yeah, these memory days, really so much. People were coming in with bags of material, of music that they had written, or poems, and all sorts of bits of music and memories that really helped us out with our project no end. We also put an exhibition of what we had found together in the Heritage Centre, so that people could come in and see some of the things that we'd found out.
So this was another, in April we had our sort of second major event, as well as that we had the children's the workshops and then the memory days, and then here we had a troil, which is a Cornish evening of music and dance that was hosted as part of the Roseland festival. So that was an important aspect of what we tried to do with the project, was kind of latch on to things that were already happening and bring Cornish elements of it through the project to new audiences. So that was really fun. And for this troil, it included the Bray family, who the son, Finley, who's I think 16 or 17, wrote us a new tune for the Roseland Furry, which was taught to the audience or to the participants at the troil. And then we'd also commissioned a young singer-songwriter and instrumentalist called Martha Woods to reimagine two pieces that we'd found in the English Folk Dance and Song Society's archive that had been collected in Tregony. Where had they been collected? It was Jo Chynoweth, wasn't it?
Yeah, one at Ruin Islands.
One at Ruin Highlands. So she'd reimagined these two songs, which she played, premiered there as well. And then we also had the shanty group Do Hagawa come along to sing. So that was a really exciting part of the project, to have the Roseland Furry and new music out in the open. All right, yeah, that was the Troil. That was absolutely marvellous. And on the next slide, we've got Martha's CD, Golden Furs in Bloom, which she included these songs on.
And then the last one, we mentioned the tunes that were composed with the names of Roseland Methodist chapels. Anna Hawken put them into a new medley, and St Austell Band came along and played them at Philly Fair in August, along with St Anthony Moyes playing some tunes as well.
So, yeah, the legacy of the project is the reinterpretation and reimagination of archive pieces, all of which we're really proud that we're going to have on the Cornish National Music Archive website, so that they're freely available to anybody who wants to find out more about music of the Roseland or use those pieces themselves. So we're really pleased that this project highlighted music connected with the Roseland across all different styles and kind of aspects, and will hopefully inspire performers in the future. And on the next slide, it just gives us a list of some of the people, and organisations that we managed to collaborate with across the course of that project.
So, swiftly on to the next project, which is the Roseland Carol Project. The Federation of Old Cornwall Societies has been really supportive of regional carol singing across Cornwall over the years, and particularly bringing them in to perform at the cathedral. So we wanted to do a carol project on the Roseland as well. So again, the lead partners were these three, but perhaps with the Old Cornwall taking more of a lead on this occasion. Of course, with the Heritage Centre providing the anchor and funding, following the same sort of methodology as the last one in terms of where we got the material from.
Yeah, we were lucky to find all sorts of carols. I know that Camborne and Redruth have a kind of a cornerstone of the Cornish carolling tradition, but they are all over Cornwall. And one of the lovely things that we were able to do was look at this 1927 publication by Ben Barnicott, who had collected manuscripts that had belonged to his great-grandfather. And a lot of this is covered in a little video that we've got later on. But the main thing that came out of this one was, is Tregony in the Roseland? Nev says no to someone from the North Coast. I would say yes, but it's not, is it? No, it's not. But as a gateway to the Roseland, and because this publication hadn't been printed for almost a century, we included them. There are also several in the Cornish songbook that had included manuscripts of W.C. Dunstone, who at that point was secretary of the London Cornish Association, and they were his grandfather's manuscripts from Portlow. Here's an example that we used later on in the project. So we had musical sources, music books, but Nev also did some great newspaper research.
Yeah, so we just using the National Newspaper Archive, we found accounts of carol services in the Roseland, and we're able to list to find some of the carols from those sources as well. And that was one of them. List Our Merry Carol was one that was sung, I think, in 1902 at Gerrans and at Philly.
Yeah, it was lovely to imagine and uncover some of these carols that probably aren't heard so often anymore. One that definitely hadn't been heard for a very long time is this next item, which again we'll talk about a bit later. But this was a fascinating example of a piece that had been sung in Portlow Village, but had dropped out of use completely, and until we came across it with Christine Edwards in Verrian and collaborated with her friend Joyce Gilbert, we were able to reconstruct it with the help of Peter Meanwell, who is director of the Washaway Gallery Choir, and has been a huge help, another collaborator in this project.
One of the things we found was that when they wrote it down, they didn't necessarily put the right words under the right notes. So when you moved them along a bit, it worked a bit better.
Yes, that is what happened. So the second memory day that we had also pulled out a lot of shared memories of carols on the Roseland. We had somebody come and mention carol tours that they remember doing. It's not something that that happens ever so wide in a widespread way so much anymore, but going and visiting houses and singing carols at Christmas was much more widespread, and so it was lovely to hear stories of that. And there were other carols and other sources identified as thanks to her as well.
Yeah, one of them was her story. We found this person who I hadn't heard of before, Florence Gertrude Stodden, nee Attenborough. She also went under the nom de plume of Christabel. But she was, in the beginning of the 20th century, she became a professional lyricist. And what she was doing was writing the words for music and then publishing them in books or in newspapers and inviting musicians to come forward and put the music to them. Which they did, and there are scores of her works in the various libraries. And her father was one time minister at Porthscatho. She married a Cornishman, and although they lived up in England, they did return in the Second World War and lived in Porthscatho, and she's buried in the churchyard of Porthscatho. This was one of the poems that she wrote and published that we don't think was ever put to music.
Yeah, that's lovely. An Easter carol. They're not all Christmas carols. Our next item that we've got up there is our Cornish language item, which was lovely to have. So the St Day carol came to us through a woman called Yvonne Fuller, who was a professional opera singer who had relocated to St Mawes. And in the 70s, she had been involved in a church service that was aiming to have carols in as many languages as they could find. And she wrote to her aunt, who was at that point in Porthscatho. Polperro. So she wrote to the aunt in Polperro, who got in touch with somebody who could speak Cornish and sent her not only a written lyrics of St Day Carol in Cornish, but also a recording from the 70s of the St Day Carol in Cornish. So that was lovely. So she performed it in this church service in 1973, and then when she came back down to Cornwall, she set up a group called the St Mawes Waits, which sing carols at the Tresanton Hotel every Christmas Eve, and they sing a Cornish language carol at Tresanton every Christmas Eve.
So we found over 40 carols with connections to the Roseland, and we found one with connected to every parish except Ruin-Lanihorn.
Which we did remedy in the end.
Yeah. One thing that's worth mentioning is our approach to funding is that we went out, or I went out and spoke to each of these councils and told them all about the project and got little bits of money off of all of them. Because what we deliberately wanted to do was to include these communities in our collaboration. It wasn't just a matter of getting the money off them. We wanted to make sure that they were fully engaged, and we really succeeded in that.
Yeah, they were incredibly supportive, all of them. And we also had a kind of unexpected extra bit of support from the University of Sheffield, who are running a project called Access Folk, which is run in their music department, finding out how and why people might experience barriers to getting involved in folk music and particularly singing. And so this project seemed to fit in really well with them, and we were lucky enough to get support from them. And they were interested in how we were going to engage our communities with the idea of singing these carols, which I realise we haven't said is the part of the point of the project, was not just to find them, but to get them sung. So they were hugely helpful throughout.
So we moved on to the activity phase of the project. Again, there was an exhibition at the Heritage Centre which included the carols. And then one of the things that we did is we got the local historians down at Ruin-Lanihorn to give us some information on their history and their local place names. And then we gave that to Gareth Churcher, who remedied the Ruin-Lanihorn situation by composing a brand new carol for Ruin-Lanihorn.
Just as an aside, Sheffield's funding couldn't be used for religious purposes, and so we wrote it in that the new carol must actually be secular, which makes it quite an unusual kind of an unusual one in the collection. But I think it was actually really worthwhile because it tells a little bit of the story of the unknown places in Ruin-Lanihorn, doesn't it? And then a big part of the project was writing a carol book. So our collection of 40 carols, we sent over to Peter Meanwell, our incredibly patient transcriber, who put all of these different sources, some of them, handwritten or needing reconstruction or different printers, and we wanted them all to look and be easily readable and usable by people in a new carol book. I wrote short commentaries on the history of each one as far as we could find it, because I was by no means alone in doing the research on this. Peter was a huge help, as was Christine Edwards, who gave a lot of help in the proofreading and wrote a lovely foreword for us. It was published by the Federation of Old Cornwall Societies, and it was launched at the Truro Cathedral Carol Service. That was the Carols of the Roseland service. Another important thing that we did with the funding was to make sure that this carol book was given freely to schools and libraries, not just in the Roseland, but across Cornwall, so that these carols are now back in circulation, hopefully for people to pick up in future. And it is still available on the Federation website shop.
So we have to move on to teaching the carols to people. New choirs were formed. Music director put in place, Pam Carbis, and Pam's with us today. Thank you, Pam. And a whole host of rehearsals, and they had to learn 4 new carols. And there are the motley crew at the first rehearsal. And there's Pam. Is that a good picture of you, Pam?
No, honestly, without Pam, this phase of the project would not have happened, because we desperately needed a musical director who would be able to marshal these groups, and Pam was the woman for the job.
So we also put together a children's choir to sing the Ruin Langhorne carol, and we had the help of Kay Robinson, who leads the Phillies singing group. And I think we've got another little video to show the children singing that song.
This quiet place has stories to tell. St. Bruno came here inside a church and well. It once was busy with people and trade, as journeys from London to Penzance were made. Lanny ho, Landgate, money's up, money's up.
That was very sweet. And those are names that don't really appear on maps, do they? Those are local names. Yeah, they're lovely.
So to get we had to get different choirs to learn different numbers of carols, and we included Amici Dwocci, Roseland Church's choir, and St Anthony Noise as the band.
Yeah, that was marvellous.
There's Emma again. She also leads the St Anthony Noise, so she was well involved in the project.
Yeah, so that was fantastic.
So Just Feast invited us to come down and give us a talk and sing some of the songs, and they gave us their collection that day towards the project.
That was really kind.
So that was the final rehearsal with everybody together.
And it was absolutely necessary to have this rehearsal, because the Federation has put on carol services at the cathedral before, but nothing as sort of complicated or ambitious as this one, with different groups combining to sing different carols, and a children's group and a band. So this last rehearsal was so needed to bring it all together. And the 4th of December itself was a really triumphant evening. We had a lot of support from Truro Old Cornwall Society and Bert Biscoe, who were always so helpful with these. We launched the book, which we're really happy sold really well. I hope people are enjoying those throughout the year. And so the carol service, we had the 9 carols and Lingham. And one thing that Nev was really keen to make sure happened in the service was that there was a carol from each parish, so that all of the communities who had supported us throughout the project saw themselves represented in the service itself. And we also had 4 short talks. I mean, you've got your kind of bracket of carols, and then we had 4 people speaking. So Nev and I introduced the project a little bit and spoke about carolling in Cornwall and how it's a big part of Cornwall's musical culture. But we had a story from Christine Edwards, who wrote our foreword about carolling with her great aunts and how her memories had come into the project and given us some material to put in. We had Father Doug Robbins and Trounce Guy, who gave a dialect poem that was fantastic. Another important part of the service that Chris Trevina, who hasn't had a mention yet, but he is out there, helped us with was live streaming it. So even though it was a late night shopping night and half of Truro's car parks were closed, it was wonderful to be able to make sure that not only was it recorded, but it was also available for people to listen at home at the time and then, whenever else as well. So we've got a lovely record of the whole evening, which was just a joy.
One of the unintended consequences of getting so many choirs involved is, of course, that having persuaded them to learn the new carols and put them in their repertoire, they all used them in their rehearsals and performances in the lead up to Christmas. And when I put them on a spreadsheet, there were over 70 events that included era carols last year, which I was blown away by. But it kind of happened by accident, but a great accident nonetheless. And we should be able to show you another video now to show you a little bit about what we're talking about, the carols themselves.
So I know that some of that doesn't sound like folk music, but it very much is community music and would have been. And we're so pleased that the legacy of this project has been to capture it and be able to make it available again for people to use and celebrate it through in this way this last winter. We've got material that's going to be included in the upcoming Old Cornwall Spring Journal. We've got all the recordings that are available on the Federation's YouTube. We've had new discoveries. We've been fortunate enough to be able to commission new compositions, and Nev is already talking to people about Roseland carols for this year.
I am. And also, we mentioned the Easter carol that Florence Attenborough had done the words for. We've already got 2 people to put 2 musical settings to that, so we now have a new Easter carol. And of course, as soon as you publish a book and you think you've gathered all the carols, somebody says, "Oh, did you know about this other one from Portlow?" so we've got another one from Portlow to add into our next publication. We want to do some of these in Cornish and add to the Cornish YouTube channel, and that's something I'm working on. I've just commissioned a translation from the translation service of First Noel, and hopefully we can get that done in the next 12 months. And there's some of the collaborators, Kate.
Yeah, that's our group of us, a triumphant photo on the night. So Nev, Pam, Clive Brown, Kay Robinson. In the middle is Rebecca Drazy-Collishaw from the University of Sheffield, who came down to see what we'd been up to. Emma, Alison, Bert, Alan, Bashforth and me. But that is just a small group compared to this massive list of people and organisations who supported us all the way through the Roseland Carol project. It was extraordinary to be able to bring a lot of different people together. It was focused on the Roseland and had a lot of community support, but as you were saying, there were other people from outside the Roseland who saw the value of it, and we were really pleased with how it's all gone. The innovation side of it, which we're really delighted to be nominated for as well, is that we feel that we've innovated in a few ways, reconstructing carols that were lost or that we weren't sure about how they were originally sung. We had the new composition in Rue and Lanahorn. Putting together 2 new carol choirs is nothing to be sniffed at. The idea is aiming to put these carols back in the community so that in future years there can be material and enthusiasm and confidence on the Roseland to bring a caroling tradition in that flourishes on its own, not without having to have a project behind it or even pushing it along. And bringing those two new choirs into the multiple choir group that we put together for the service the royal we, Pam, put together for the service was fantastic. We've talked about the community engagement, and I thought that going around to all the parishes to ensure that communities felt approached and represented in the project was really good. And bringing these different archive and museum pieces to life and having them reinterpreted in some cases has been a wonderful experience as well. So I know we've raced through that, and we've actually got 2 minutes before 3:15.
One last video.
Oh, I've got one last video, sorry. Yeah, one last video.
Arise and hail the glorious star, which brought the wise men from afar, which led them on this happy morn to see the great Messiah born, to see I feel honour bound to say I did not have any input into the production of the videos. And as hopefully we've put across to you, it's not just me and it's not just Pam, it's been everybody that we were involved with over the last 2 years that we've been working on this.
It's been a tremendous amount of hard work, and we're really grateful to all of the people that worked with us to achieve what we achieved. But I hope that what we put across to you is that we had a fantastic amount of fun with this project. and it is going to continue into the future as well. So thank you very much for listening.